Luis Herrera studied medicine, but he has dedicated his life to prevent diseases from the lab. Today, Dr. Herrera runs one of the biggest and most successful scientific centers of Cuba. He's a pioneer in biotechnology in this country. Doctor, you said in a previous interview with Prensa Latina, the Cuban agency, that this center, the Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, CIGB would be the letters, is the enterprise, and that's an interesting word, with the biggest impact in the sphere of biotechnology in our subcontinent, in Latin America. Why do you say that? Which would be the main challenges that you've tackled and the main successes that you have today?
That statement is based on the fact that this biotechnology in Latin America in some way has not very successful final results. Because I think that sometimes people make confusion between making immunology or making biochemistry or molecular biology, mainly molecular biology, and they believe they were doing biotechnology. And what happened is that many of the centers that they call themselves as biotechnology center, in reality they are not biotechnology centers. They are some kind of, they took that name because that was in some way at a good moment to be called biotechnology, but they continue doing the same as before. I mean, they continue doing biochemistry or molecular biology, making publications and going to Congress and things like that. But at the end, they didn't arrive to have a product through biotechnological way. It means they are not doing biotechnology. The reason why the American journal Nature, 1998, I believe, they published an editorial saying that the Cuban biotechnology is the best established biotechnology in the whole third world, because they have the best industry of biotechnology. This is very precise. I mean, they don't make any kind of statement concerning genetic or something else. They make a statement based on biotechnology. And the reason why this happened like that is because from the beginning, from the real beginning, the idea was to produce and to arrive to a product. That was the idea of our commander-in-chief.
Don Fidel Castro.
Fidel Castro. And this idea was so important that he created, that was in the year 1980, and also 1981, he creates an organization called at that time Biological Front, that was created at the same time that happened in Japan, something similar. The idea was to be able to do everything in Cuba, from the lab up to the commercial activity. And this idea was simply genial, because that was the possibility to really do biotechnology. Otherwise, you can publish, you can do very wonderful philosophical thesis and for doctors, but it's not going to have a final results. And his idea was the main basis of the reason why Cuba had such a tremendous development in biotechnology since already more than something close to 50 years. That started before, when people were trained abroad like in my case, for example, in France, or also in Italy and Switzerland, also in the States. But the real moment happened when our commander-in-chief decided to develop biotechnology based on our own strength, using the capacity and the knowledge of abroad, but based on our own strength. That is very important, because in other places, like even in Singapore or in Malaysia, people invest a lot to develop biotechnology after our development, but they base their development in foreigners. And at the end, their own capacity was not so developed. And in our case, that was one of the most important ideas, was to be able to have this environment from the lab dedicated to make DNA sequence, the other one to make monoclonal antibodies, the other one able to purify protein from bacteria, fermenters, and that all was the basis of the development we started at the beginning of the 80s. There is a phenomenon called in genetic the effect of the foundation. I mean, when something starts since the beginning, then it had the possibility to develop at the same time that develop the rest of the world. But when you start too behind, then it's almost impossible to really reach the level required to be original, to give, and to have new ideas. I think that kind of things are very important to understand why Cuba has this particular kind of development in biotechnology.
You mentioned how important was the idea of creating a closed scheme or system in which it started with the idea, and after all, the same institution took care of the commercial activity of the product, of the technology, the patent, the license issues, and all that. And you have that kind of closed system in which you take care of all that. That means you make money, important amounts of money for the Cuban government. And I would like to know, as other centers of in this field, we talked, for example, with Dr. Agustin Laje that told us a little bit about this. And I want to know, what are the main advantages of this kind of system? And in terms of the commercial activity, we've seen all around the world how the pharmaceutical companies tend to work in thinking only about the money. But you belong to a government which is socialist, and you need to answer to problems of our society. So you have the two goals together. How do you make that idea work in practice?
Well, that is really very complicated, because the Cuban society and the Cuban population, in some way, mainly since already more than 15 years, is a population having a rather increasing age, and many of the diseases that the Cuban population has right now belong to the developed world. I mean, chronic, not transmissible disease. That makes that if we want to really attack the problem related with the Cuban population, we have mainly we do mainly attack the problem related with the same problem related with the developed world. But nevertheless, we have to, or we had mainly at the beginning, also to resolve some problem, like this one concerning the production of vaccines. And right now, the Cuban population in some way receive 13 different kind of vaccines, and almost 8 antigen of these 13 vaccines are produced in Cuba. We produce here the hepatitis B, hemophilus influenza. These vaccines are preventive vaccines, and they have been used with very good results in Cuba and also in some other 4 or 5 countries, including Argentina, Venezuela, Ecuador, and Nicaragua, and Uruguay also like that. But what happened, Cristina, is that when we started to produce, we had not our own products. Then we developed the capacity to establish new process, because there is the process and the product. And on the basis of our capacity to start new process, we create product not being original, but being based on our technology. That is the case of hepatitis B. We had our own technology. That is the case of hemophilus influenza. We use the technology developed by the Havana University and Canadian University. And that is the case of the pentavalent vaccine that is being made from the 2 products made in CIGB and the 3 products made in Fila Institute. And finally, formulation takes place in the biocenter. It's a typical production chain in that case. But that was a good, we can say, start in terms of the possibility to close the cycle, in terms of the possibility to have a product at the level of our technical capabilities. But during that process, we realized that for us was almost imperative to develop a completely new product, a completely new, we can say, results in terms of application or in terms of a new approach. That is the case, for example, of HebeProp.
Your leader product, the most important one.
Yeah, it's the most important one for us and also for the whole biotechnology right now in Cuba. Why we said that we had the need to develop completely new products? Because having interest in economical terms, in order to be able to reach the very important market, because distribution in the world is not very homogeneous. Almost 50% of the market in biological belong to states, perhaps something like 30, 35 to European Union, and then Japan 8% perhaps, and the whole world, the rest. It means that if you really want to get an important revenue in terms of market, you have to be able to reach those markets. The process to reach those markets is practically the history of this center, in the sense that there were many obstacles created by the companies to avoid that any other one could get included among the very relative small number of companies in charge to produce real new products. That this process starts from intellectual property. Then you have to have production capabilities. Then you have to have all the requirements in terms of regulatory requirement. Then you have to have clinical trials. Then you have to have people able to follow very complicated commercial process. That takes years.
What are the priorities? The disease you want to tackle, or the partner that you have able for the money interested in that product? How do you organize that? How do you prioritize
Well,
that?
this is another question. If you don't have good ideas that it can be transformed in very strong patent position, then those partners are not going to be interested in you. There are two main kind of partners. Those that are in charge or are interested to develop or completely new original products, and other partners just interested to commercialize the product already existing. We have both. I mean, in the countries, because we don't have the strength of a multinational company, then we have to have, we can say, agreement with the company locally in order they get in charge to get registration, to sell the products, to do everything to get the final market. But at the same time, we have relationship with partners interested to develop projects together and to share rights due to the co-development of projects. And also we have projects in which we don't have partner at all. And we develop by ourselves, and in a way that if we finally get a result more close to the market, the value of you are going to share is going to be bigger than if you share from the beginning. I mean, this complicated process that you said, what is the most important? Well, I believe that both are very important, because if you don't have good ideas, you don't have good patents, right? If that also doesn't happen, then you are not going to have good partners. The process to have good partners and to be able to get final results with that is a different process and different rules than to have good new ideas and to develop from the scratch completely new ideas.
You talk about innovation and good ideas. And for that, you need well-trained people, well-educated people, young people. And I know that you've established a system, a wage system, which is much better than others that we can see in other kinds of scientific center in Cuba. But anyway, my question is, you were educated in Cuba, but in France and Switzerland and Italy. That doesn't happen as much as it happened during your formation or education years. What are your main strategies to keep the young people, smart people, to stay in this center and in Cuba working for this kind of science field and development?
The most important is to really be able to achieve that the young people get in the possibility to play a very important role in what they are doing. I mean, it's true that they perhaps have not the same possibility to stay so long abroad, but at least in our case, we do the biggest effort in order they can go abroad and to get in contact with foreigners, and get in contact with the most important idea. Not enough, but we do our effort. But I think that the most important simply is to give them, be able to demonstrate their capacity, to give them the possibility to really play an important role.
Cuba is living an interesting process, Doctor, in which the economy is being redesigned and updated in order to make our country more prosperous, more rich, and improve the quality of life of Cubans, even though we are still under a very deep blockade from the United States. And it seems sometimes that it's not possible to invest in science and at the same time be able to do what the government of Cuba is doing updating the economy, trying to balance the payments, the debts, and a series of complex series of things that were happening in the economy before. Do you think these two things are a contradiction? The fact that you are trying to develop the economy in a fast way and at the same time invest in science for the future? Is it possible to have a sustainable science development process currently and at the same time updating our economy?
Your question are very complicated. Well, the Cuban government that started, I must say, after the 65 or 66, with the creation of the CENIC and other centers in Cuba. With the
National Center of
National Center
Scientific
for Scientific
Research.
Research, and also ICITCA and other institutions related with science or technology. Since that time, and also institution linked to the Ministry of Higher Education. At a given moment, the promotion of science and technology in Cuba was very, very high, and was based on a big investment done by the Cuban government to promote the development of science and technology in Cuba, on the idea that that promotion was going to be the basis of development of the economy of Cuba. Then in 1990, when disappeared the socialist world and the Soviet Union.
The collapse of the Soviet Union.
Collapse of the Soviet Union. And when Fidel said that it's like if the sun were not coming out from the east for Cuba, things changed completely. And it's true. I mean, you don't admit that, you are not living in the real world. It's true that the Cuban government couldn't continue having the same investment of promotion of science in such a wide direction like happened before. That is true. And the consequence of that is that some kind of a group of different branches or different fields didn't continue having enough, we can say, promotion or possibility of development like other activities. In the particular case of biotechnology, I think that the fact that the idea was to develop a closed cycle permit to start having revenue from that specific branch, I mean from biotechnology. And that revenue stimulate the fact that continue the development and the promotion of biotechnology in the country. And I think that this is one of the bases in terms of economic terms why this particular branch continue development, to having development in Cuba, and that also happen at the same level in other branches of science and technology in the country. I think that the fact that Cuba is now changing the way to establish the basis of development and creating companies or enterprise in centers that were considered before as a research center, it's something that cannot be avoided because we have not other choice. I mean, we don't have the money to continue making promotion in different kind of fields like before, and we have enough resource to concentrate in some areas like this one, and then to continue having development and revenue. But indeed, it's true that right now in many fields there are not the same possibility like some year before for development. And I think that the only way to overcome this will be to arrive to an economical level that permit to have the possibility to restart the process of investment and promotion of science and technology in different areas. The phenomenon to develop on the basis of technology and science is very difficult. Many other countries base their development mainly on commerce, on incorporating technology already existing, but not developing science itself. This is a contradiction. I mean, I cannot say that this contradiction is overcome. It's true, and people complain about that. Many people in other areas complain about that. And it's something about that the only way I think to overcome is to really reach economical development enough to reinvest again in many areas. The situation with respect to the embargo, to the blockade, is something for us very difficult because everything is more complicated than for other countries.
In terms of, you're talking about the blockade, and in terms of your commercial activity, how does this policy affect the kind of work that you do?
Cristina, for us, the blockade exists almost every day and every moment in all kind of activity. From our procurement process, which is very complicated because it's very well known that the best biotechnology in the world is in the States. We can say that the States is the one, the second and the third in terms of development with respect to biotechnology. Then they have equipment, reagents, and things like that practically the only they have, and for us it's very complicated. I'm not going to give information that's going to be useful for people that can want to not to permit us to continue having development. And the second is at the end, because if a company is an important company in the world, then there are two possibilities. One, that is perhaps 70%, they are American company, then they are completely submitted to the blockade. And the second is that they are European companies. If they are very important companies, then they are interested in the American market. Then the blockade for them is very important, even if they are not American companies. Then it rests rather, we can say a
small
number of companies that have enough interest to invest in Cuba in a new project or in a Cuban product or in a Cuban project, not being American, not being motivated by the American market. That is, in that sense, very difficult. Nevertheless, it arrived to have people interested in having relationship with us. But it's a very complicated thing. One of the reasons why for us, China, for example, it's a very important country. It's because they start to have, in some respect, an important market, They are motivated by technology and by new products. They are not inside the American world in terms of blockade. And that is the reason why we make so many efforts to develop relationship with China. But at the same time, we are obliged to continue having or trying to have relationship with Americans and Europeans, because this interaction for us is practically vital, in the sense that if this interaction doesn't exist, we cannot continue having the same possibility of new ideas, a new process, new products.
And do you feel hopeful after December 17th and the announcement of both governments to reestablish relationships and to eventually normalize in case of the lifting of the blockade? What are the advantages that you see in that scenario? Are you hopeful towards that scenario?
Well, I had the opportunity to be already involved during the Carter period. And at that time, something happened similar to right now. I mean, a lot of America came here. After that, that didn't continue. I hope and I want that this time it's not going to be like that.
You expect not Reagan in the White House?
I expect more Reagan in the White House. There's some Reagan around, but...
yeah, there's some
yeah,
trying to get there.
Trying to get there. In fact, we receive practically every week one American company. And
but they can't do business with you.
They cannot. They cannot. And what happened is sometimes it's really unbelievable that they ignore. They simply ignore.
They don't know.
Yeah, they don't know. They sometimes propose you, and then you have to say then, please try to get an advice from your lawyer, because
you don't know your own law.
you know your own law.
Your own legislation.
Your own legislation. It's like that. But I hope that this time some things could be different. But it's not easy to get clear in that respect. But it's very complicated. Interesting, but complicated.
Thank you so much, Doctor. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.